So the next one, we're still in chapter 8, yokes and flanges, and we're talking about the classic shirt yoke, which you can see here. It's what most men's shirts have, a classic yoke like this. What's interesting about the yoke is sometimes it has gathers, sometimes it has a box pleat into the back, sometimes it's going to, a lot of times it will come to the front. So when we put this all together at the end, it will have to connect to the front piece because it's going to have a forward shoulder, and we'll come across that. You will be working with your back sloper, finally the back. Oftentimes your back sloper will have a shoulder dart, so we'll talk about that. You may have learned this when you from your draping class, that there's a dart there in your shoulder that you need to take out the excess from. But in this particular example, we left the shoulder dart in there so that we can then pivot it closed. But in this particular case, I'm also going to show you how to just create that back yoke. So the issue with the back yoke is you want to be conscious of the placement. So classic yoke is at least 4.5 inches down from the back neckline. If you look at, so that's exactly what this is, 4.25, 4.5. You don't want to get, it's a design detail, so however long or short you make it is completely up to you. You want to be conscious of your armhole notches. You want to be above your armhole notches on your back armhole so that it doesn't come into it's into the underarm portion of your armhole. So you want to stay here. This is typically known as the cross back. This is where your shoulder blades are, so it's going to create the most stress and where you need the most ease. So that's often why there's usually gathering here at the center back, or that pleat is to create ease in through the garment across the shoulder area. So it's both functional and a design detail. So we're going to come up with a way to transfer the dart. So if you had a dart in the shoulder, we need to design our style line, close this back dart, which is what here, square the style line. This would then break off into 2 separate pieces, and then we connect the 2 pieces together to the front. I'm going to show the same process to you using the basic back sloper that you have. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to trace this off so we can chop it up again. I'm going to move these instructions out of the way so I have a clean workspace. And of course, after we chop it up, we'll be sticking it to our point paper so it's easy to see. So just like with our fronts, rule of thumb, establish your grain line. That's your solid north. Hook up your bodice sloper to the grain line. Trace off your bodice sloper, neckline, shoulder, armhole, including armhole notches, side seam, waist, dart legs, pivot point at the back. I want to talk a little bit about back darts for a moment. So on the front, we've been backing off the apex dart. We don't have the same issue on the back dart. There's no bust line to deal with, so these can go fully up to the dart length. They become style lines, however you want to do with them. And then we want to mark where we want our yoke to be. I'm just going to follow what I have drafted here on my sloper. This is this cross back area. So it's about 4.25 inches down from the center back neck. So I'm going to make that perpendicular to the center back, and that will become my style line. And I have my darts here. We're going to close this. Well, you're going to close that dart. We're going to close the dart in the waist because I want this to be a shirt. And I'm going to pivot this dart. It's got to go somewhere. So you have to decide where you want to pivot to. I'm going to pivot the dart for now into the excess that I have that's going to be coming out of here at my center back so that I can use it as a style line. And then that excess that ends up becoming here will becoming what I end up using for my back pleats. So now that I've traced it off, make sure that you mark your center back on both of these pieces because we'll be cutting them in half. So I'm going to cut it out. Waist, side seam, center back, neck, shoulder, armhole, get rid of my excess. Now comes the fun. So, as you remember, first things first, draft your true north. This is my center front, my center back in this case now. Grain line or seam. That's what I'll be hooking up to. So I'm going to have two pieces here. Now I'm going to want to remove my dart excess from my waist. And we are going to pivot that into this center back area so that I turn this excess into a box pleat. Remember to back off from that apex. And then this will be my design line, my yoke line. This will become two separate pieces. So I'm going to slash on my style line. This will become a separate pattern piece. So now I want to hook my center back up to the grain line. Secure it along the center back grain. Pivot my back waist dart closed. Secure my closed back waist dart. Now this excess will be what we're going to end up using for our pleats. Then I also have this yoke piece here. This is going to be a separate pattern piece, so I want to hook it right now up here on my center back. But remember what I said, that the back yoke usually comes to the front. There's a forward shoulder, so we need our front bodice sloper to connect the shoulder. Here's my front, basic front bodice. I'm connecting my shoulder. I'm going to extend this here, extend my armhole. And we're usually going to be drafting 1 inch forward shoulder. Sometimes it's 1.5. Again, this is a style line, but at a bare minimum, you want it to come 1 inch over the shoulder. And usually that's for a better fit, so that it doesn't slide to the back. Oftentimes people have slopey shoulders. So now, when we go to add our seam allowances here, we need to keep this as our shoulder, true shoulder seam notch, so that we know when we attach a sleeve to here, the cap of that sleeve is going to hook up to the true shoulder. Our collar is going to hook up to the true shoulder, as well as to the center back neck. When we go to trace off our center back here, we want to talk about, where do we want that pleat to go? Do we want the pleat to go here at this placement, or gathers along the center back? It's a design line. So in this particular style, I'm going to say that I want a pleat or tuck to be here 2 inches on each back panel. So I'm going to draft this. Remember, we want to keep the center back part stable. So I'm going to come in 2.5 inches from the armhole, and then I'm going to come in, I'm going to mirror that on my bottom pattern piece, 2.5 inches. So I can create a style draft here, pivot this into my style line. So now we have our pleat here, and we want to add, this is basically excess. We want to radiate this excess in through here. So I can create another slash line. So just design lines we want to blend, basically. So that we have a nice smooth seam in through here. Evenly distributing that fullness. Remember, we learned this in our previous demonstrations about distributional fullness. So we want a pleat 2.5 inches in, which is what this notch is going to be from the side seam. And then we want the rest of the pleat to end about 4 inches in. So it's just going to be a little 3/4 of an inch pleat. So this one will also be 4 inches in. Remember, we're mirroring whatever happens here at the front to the back to the bottom. So that excess will be pleated into these 2 notches. We want to blend the bottom hem. Make sure that this is got its grain lines. Now that these are the back, so this will be center back, cut on fold. Same thing here. And you will label. So this is going to be your name, and this is back bodice with pleat at yoke, cut 1 on fold, year end season, and size. Same thing up here. This is back yoke, cut 1 on fold, year, size. And then you'd go through and you add your seam allowances. Don't forget to transfer the armhole notches. There's always 2 on the back. Don't forget to add, when you open these up, a notch at the center front and the center back neck so that we know where these connect. And you transfer these control notches to the bottom part of the bodice. And that was 702 or 702 classic back yoke with pleat.